If you've experienced something unbelievably weird and unexplainable that left you feeling isolated and afraid, the Paranormal PTSD Recovery Podcast is for you. Each week, we go from haunting to healing by focusing on one of our 3 core focal points: personal stories, healing tips, and understanding the unknown. We help you to know that you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you can heal. Now here's your hostess, Laura Giles. We have talked about aliens and ghosts. Lots of people have had encounters with these creatures, but today we're switching it up and exploring the mysteries of cryptids of Southwest England with fantasy author Mark Rains. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Laura. Yes, most people would probably be thinking, well, why Southwest England? Well, basically because I live there. And Cornwall, to me, is literally every time I go across the border about 8 or 9 times, because the river runs in weird and wonderful directions. So you can go 8 or 9 times from Devon to Cornwall. You know, Bude's only up the road. Well, up the road, like 8 miles, but that's up the road for us. But, you know, that's nothing distance-wise to America. I mean, America is like thousands of miles. You know what I mean, isn't it?
Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about the cryptids of Southwest England is that it's one of my favorite places. And I've been there many times, and it's a spooky place. Lots of reputations for that, and I've had lots of paranormal experiences there. And I heard of the Beast of Bodmin Moor for the very first time when I went there. But before we get into that, how did you get interested in cryptids?
Well, basically, I used to live in a place called Woolsworthy, or Woolsbury for short, and I was looking for something to do, some voluntary work. So I got involved in an organisation called CFZ, which is Centre for Freudian Zoology, which is run by a man called Jonathan Downes, who's one of the leading authorities on cryptozoology. And he basically had a talk with me. He said, once you get involved, you get involved in life. And then I learned a lot of stuff from him through volunteer work and learning what he does and basic things. He's got vast of knowledge than I have. But I just got interested more in this end because obviously I thought, I'll follow the stories that's more relatable than, say, Wales or Scotland or anywhere else where I could visit, if I wanted to.
Okay, so if someone's listening and they're just like, I don't know what a cryptid is or a cryptozoology, can you explain that?
Well, cryptid technically, when most people think monster, and probably most people think cryptozoology is to do monsters, but it's also if there's a new species or unfound, something that's unusual, say like when we find new dinosaur, there's often a new dinosaur comes up quite regularly. They find new bones they thought never existed in the first place.
Right.
And that also is cryptozoology in the sense of the word. It's obviously got loads of different branches, but we won't go into that.
Okay, so basically it's just an unknown or mysterious beast.
Yeah, basically. As I say, most people say monster, but that's a bit that most people are interested in, let's be honest.
Okay. So I would love to start with Bodmin Moor because it's, like I said, one of my favorite places. But before we talk about the Beast of Bodmin Moor, again, for background, I'm sure many Americans have no idea what a moor is. I didn't until I went there. So can you tell us, like, to set the tone and give a picture of that, what is a moor, and specifically, what does Bodmin Moor look like?
Well, Bodmin Moor is vast, like very hilly, very mountainous. It's like, if you went there, the weather can change in a blink of an eye. It literally could be sunny 1 minute, pouring rain the next, mist, very cold, all in one day. There are people that live on the outskirts of the moor, obviously, like everybody does. But it went the deeper parts of the moor is still very uninvestigated. Basically, the odd hill farmer or somebody like that would live on there. It's not a very habitable place. You wouldn't technically choose to live there.
Yeah, when I would read the old Jane Austen books and you hear these stories about people getting lost on the moor, I just had no concept of, this girl gets a cold and then almost died. It just made no sense to me until I was there and got lost and the fog rolls in. I have no idea where I am, no idea how to get out, any of that. And all of a sudden it all clicked.
Yeah, until you experience it, as you say.
Yeah.
It's a bit like if people went to the Rocky Mountains in America, where it's a vast area, and it could be quite easy to get lost there if you didn't get directions. It's not the same place, but it's a similar kind of feeling about being lost and, well, how do I get out? It's not like you got a telephone to go anyway, and your mobile signal might not work because of the dips on the instructions in the way.
Yeah. So I think that helps to set the tone of why you could have the Beast of Bodmin Moor there and it be so elusive.
Well, yeah, it's basically when we had brought in the Dangerous Animal Act, well, because before then you could keep anything, but then the British government brought this act in. So basically, most people think the animals were released either by circuses or zoos that weren't technically legal, and they just released them into the wild. And there's a lot of people saying, well, how could a big cat survive in an English countryside? Because it's not, it's not America, where America you could believe it. But you've got to remember there's on the moors will be sheep kept and rabbits and probably the odd bird. So it would be feasible for a smaller big cat to live on there. Most people believe it to be a black panther. That's the most common sightings. If you look into most of the sightings, and there's even British police reports somewhere online, I can't remember where, but there's reports of big cats seen, and they've had to go and investigate it with footprints or mutilated cattle or mutilated sheep. They could survive. But I think what's happened is they're probably a subspecies of the original cat, and they've adapted, to live in this country.
Okay.
I don't think you could take a cougar and suddenly put it on the moors. I don't think it would survive straight away.
So you think it's a real cat?
I believe it is. I mean, a lot of people would argue the point, but there's been so much evidence of, as I say, footprints, people seeing it in the distance. Obviously, the photos are very rubbish because obviously every time you take a photo, it's normally a fake of a little cat in the distance, or it's always blurry. But it's always the magic picture, isn't it? If we find this picture, we'll believe it. But I think it's feasible for a cat to live there, because if you look at the lynx, I know it's a smaller cat, and it lives in the Scottish Highlands, it survives quite well. So I believe a smaller big cat could live in the moors, not a great big cat as such, a smaller, say 3 to 5 foot long, something like that.
Yeah. I've seen the photos, and I know that there's paw prints and there's videos, and I even saw some video of a woman who had claw marks on her arms. And of course, like you said, there's the dead sheep, lots of dead sheep. To me, the thing looks like a big cat. I think it is real, but how do you explain that nobody has gotten definitive proof of its existence?
Well, it's like everything. It always, because it's such a vast area, if you took 1 square mile, just for argument's sake, and then you went to another square mile, you could miss it quite easily, because obviously cats know how to camouflage themselves. If you look into Africa or any country where big cats survive, they tend to blend into the background. They don't do, oh, I'm a big cat, come and look at me. They're not going to do that, are they, in a hurry? They're going to basically say, we'll hide in the background, wait until probably night time or when there's no people about. They'll probably observe them, and then they'll quickly attack, get the meat, and then go, because they can survive on one lot of meat for quite a long time before the next supply.
Yeah. So I wanted to start with the Beast of Bodmin Moor because of the animals that we're going to talk about. It's probably the one that actually is an animal, or one that we know. And I have a friend who is a master trapper. He traps specifically for whatever he's after. So if he wants a coyote, he's trapping for coyote. If he wants a fox, he's trapping for fox. He's not going to get things that he's not trying to get. So being that there are trappers for cats, I imagine, no trapper has tried to get him? Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Or do you think there's more than one?
It's probably more than one, and I think the only reason we haven't had trappers as such, because I think they don't want to be so recognised over this country so much as they might do in America. I think it's a very British thing. It's not a very, as you know, as a race, we tend to be very reserved. And it is a true thing. We are a reserved race. We're not so open-minded about things. We try to hide things. I presume a lot of reports get hidden under the paperwork. You know, they find a dead sheep. They find it unusually dead. They're not going to report it because then they have to explain how did this cat get on your land? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? So more likely might bury it or something like that. This is conjecture, not proving anything.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It can happen. It's probably happened in some state somewhere that something's been killed and they're thinking, oh, do I report it? I report it, there's going to be a lot of police coming my way. I don't really want all this hassle. And a lot of it is, like you say, nobody wants to come forward. I reckon there's a lot of books out there. There's loads on Amazon and places like that about the Beast of Bodmin and how they've got loads and loads of pictures and evidence. And there's lots and lots of documentaries on YouTube.
Yeah.
Lots of people looked into it.
Yeah, I saw one where a person, I can't remember if it was a man or a woman, but the rancher lost 50 sheep. So like here with coyotes, a coyote's going to come back and they're going to snack on you until you got nothing left. So it seems to me that if that's the case, you're in a perfect position to trap that cat because you know it's going to come back.
Yeah, as I say, I don't really know the reason why it is. As I'm only conjecturing. But I imagine there is people that set up traps and cameras and little pits and things like that to try and catch it. But because cats are in nature, you look at your own cat. If you look at your own cat, which is a smaller version of a wild cat, really, in speaking terms, you know how elusive they can be. They can disappear for days.
Yes, yeah.
So, you know, you imagine that twice as big. And it could be, you know, that's my opinion. I'm no expert in this. Lots of people can go, don't be so silly, Mark. You know, you probably get that comment, but as I say, I'm no expert, people.
So there's another modern Cornish cryptid, the Owlman. What's the story with the Owlman?
Well, the Owlman, it came from the fact that people think it was made up by a person called Tony Doc Shields. He says he made it up in 1976. He said he made this creature up, but there's a big but of this. Because there's been sighting, there was two girls on the 17th of April 1976 who when they saw a large feathered birdman and their father cut short his holiday to mention it, and then that's how they reckon it come about. According to them, in another sighting some years later, there's two other girls camping and they heard like an eerie buzzing sound coming from the forest. You know, like, you know, when you walk through a forest and there's that creepy sound that you can't get rid of. And this freaked them out, obviously. So they didn't know what to think of it. So they reported it. It's all in the papers and all that. But there is a lot of theory that it was made up. But I think, obviously, you have got a similar story, the Mothman.
Yeah.
I mean, I know obviously that's related to disaster, isn't it? So there's a bridge, and
the Silver Bridge,
foretold the disaster. Whether the Owlman is true, or it could have been a misidentification of a big bird, like a big barn owl coming out, and they didn't quite see it in the light.
Yeah, I mean, we do have big owls. In England, there's the eagle owl, which can be 3 feet tall. I've never seen a owl that big. And I mean, I know they exist, but if I think I saw a 3 foot tall owl or a 6 foot tall owl, I'd be freaking out. But they exist.
Yes, I say, you've got to think at the time, you're young, you might have been doing various things, and we won't say what. And then you might have just seen something like hallucinated a little bit, and that could be it, because your mind can play some fantastic tricks on you. I mean, you go out at night. I defy anyone to go out at night, and there's no lights about. All you can hear is rustling of trees and your footsteps walking along. I defy you not to be starting imagining somebody's following you, or there's something ahead of you. Oh my God, what's that? Because your mind will just suddenly go, what's this? I don't recognise this. Then the fight and flight system comes in. Oh.
Yeah, it's easy. When I first went to England, I was in Gloucestershire in the Forest of Dean, which is a long way from Bodmin Moor. But I had heard about the cat, and I'm looking for it everywhere. And I'm not normally, I'm not on the woods all the time. I live in the country, and I'm not afraid of the dark. I'm not afraid of anything. But this is different territory, and I could easily imagine that there would be some sort of creature out there, or even just walking on Bodmin Moor because of all the ghost stories out there. The fog rolls in, and you can imagine anything. Here comes a murderer or whatever, a ghost.
Well, the most famous story about moors is Sherlock Holmes. There's a lot of where he based, I think the writer based a lot of his story about the Hound of Baskerville from the legends of big cats, and just changed it from a big cat to a dog. But the dog was meant to be, it was a very scary, it turned out to be a Great Dane, all done up in whatever, but you see it at night in the dark, and again, as we say, the imagination playing tricks on you.
Yeah.
So this is how easy it can be.
Now, all cryptids don't live on land, and Cornwall has a mythical sea creature, and the sightings of this creature go back to the 1800s. So can you tell me about this one?
Well, this is called Morgwana, and it's not known so much as Loch Ness Monster. Loch Ness Monster is the one. If you ask most Americans, they've heard of Loch Ness Monster. Everybody goes to Scotland and goes to see it. Well, this one was seen purportedly near Falmouth Bay, which is in Cornwall. Now, it's supposed to appear way back in, as you say, early 17th, over the centuries. And it's described as a 20-foot long snake creature with like dark skin and humps on the back. So you can imagine it, people thinking it looking like this. Most of the sightings, as I say, go back to 140 years ago. And one was seen was a wrecked ship probably on an August day, and they found it upturned boat on its side. And as they thought it was a whale, but then they saw the three humps, and they just thought, well, it can't be a whale. But as you say, a lot, if you look into a lot of other the maps of the time of the 17th century, 18th century, all have got sea monsters. There's always a sea monster on any map. Don't matter if it's America, whatever country, there's a sea monster. Now, you've got to remember what we thought of a sea monster back then could have been a giant whale, could have been mermaids are meant to be manatees. Is it manatees?
Manatees.
Manatees, yeah. From a distance, they look like a woman, So that's why they think that was. I mean, we can go back to 1935. It was spotted Placicenid Fort Isaac, yet again described as big head, goose-like leg, huge hump on its back resembling a big barrel, 40 to 50 foot long. I mean, you can imagine seeing something like that coming past.
Yeah, that's huge.
And then you got other sightings of Rosalind Head and Tall Points. The one you're talking about is 1876. Was caught alive in Gerald Bay. The two fishermen were catching crabs, and they discovered a serpent coiled in their floating cork. When they approached it, its neck showed signs of defiance. They struck it with their oar, like, get away from us. They soon killed it and cast it back in the sea, so we don't know how true this is, what happened. 1926, a similar kind of sighting. Yet again, fishermen. Yet again, it tore away from the net, so we got no proof what it was. Then we go to 1934, 1975. This Falmouth woman and her friend were joining a stroll and Pendennis Point when he saw clear water below, a large humped, long-necked sea creek monster. It round, short stump like horns again on the top of its head, and it died shortly after. So very similar to the Loch Ness kind of seeing the creature come above, not fully seeing it diving. There's not many clear pictures. Most of the photos are yet again very obscure, easily could say be faked because of the technology we've got today would be easy to go along. I mean, the most recent one I can see here is 1999, so that wasn't that long ago, and that was a National History Museum worker who said he reckoned he captured the Morgawr on a camera, but I don't think it's a dinosaur. I don't think it's a pterosaur. I don't think that's possible. I think we would know all by now. I think yet again it's probably something like a big eel. That's because that's what they think is in Loch Ness Monster is not. They reckon it's a mutated form of eel or something like that. You know,
I've been to Loch Ness and it's famous. Lots of people go there looking for Nessie. Is it the same here with this creature?
People do go, but not on a scale that you would get in Scotland. You know, it's not as famous and it's not as easy accessible as because a lot of Cornwall's still quite rural.
Yeah,
still very narrow in those lanes. It's a big distance from one place to the other. It's 8 miles, 12 miles. And you're talking very narrow roads. And most people don't want to travel, yeah.
Yeah. For people listening, 8 miles is nothing for us, but it's on a Cornish road that can take a while.
Yeah. As you know, you've experienced it. You can say people say that's nothing, but it's a long trip when you're just doing all this twisting and turning, and you might be another car coming the other way, and you think, "Oh, what do I do?"
Yeah,
Panic sets in, doesn't it?
So I was surprised to know that England has Bigfoot sightings.
Well, yes, this is it's a little bit of a controversial subject because I had a major fallout about British Bigfoot, but I won't go into that. But anyway, the first sighting was supposed to be by 15 witnesses who claimed they saw a Bigfoot-like animal, described it as ape-like, 5 foot tall, brown hair, and green face, which is an unusual occurrence. And the next one was a large print, like Bigfoot print, found off Maiden Coombe Coast. And this was discovered by a group of people. And they stumbled on it. And although the path was muddy, large prints emerged from the nearby woods at Welcombe. Now, woods here are nothing on the scale of America. Yeah. I mean, our woods are tiny compared to your woods. I mean, your woods are like massive. So now people would say, well, how could they live here? But there are people that have had evidence of some kind. They have found footprints. And somebody I know, Daniel Burnett, he did a research because he found one not here but somewhere in Somerset way, I think. And he did he sent for like a DNA test or because he found some hairs and whatever. It come back inconclusive, but he did find evidence that there must have been animals of that kind back in like the Roman days and stuff like that. Well, that would be feasible because you've got to remember a lot of the gladiatorial games would have had straight like animals from Africa, places like that. I'm not saying they travelled through here, but they would have had animals that would have been rare to see. Like the first time you see a rhinoceros, first time you see a lion, it'd be unusual. But a lot of people think that Bigfoot over here could be more paranormal sighting, like it's a triggered warning rather than a actual being. And then there's the other one that says it is a being and it could live in this country. Deborah Hatswell is a lady you want to talk about British Bigfoot because she's got a lot of eyewitness accounts. So she would be more up to it than me because there's a lot of eyewitness accounts of seeing the beast or similar like beast in this country. But it's a big argument whether it's real or not real. And it got to a point where it got a little bit nasty, a little bit unfriendly, on a big scale. and lots of people fell out over it. So I don't get involved in the British Bigfoot scene anymore at all. So, it might be different now. So people might say, oh, no, it's not like that. But it was when I experienced it. So, I know in America it's more prevalent over there because obviously, like I said, you've got the big mountain ranges. You could feasibly believe it because of the size of the land. Because we got smaller forests, a creature could live there. I don't think a big barefoot kind of creature would not be seen by now by some sort of visualization of some sort. That's my theory. I mean, I could be proven.
Well, as you say, there's footprints, there's hair, so there's physical evidence of a creature, and yet we don't see it. We don't see its lair. So could it be kind of a hybrid of a paranormal creature?
There's one theory that I heard of. I mean, this is a bizarro theory. As someone reckon it's a survivor of ancient man ancestor has just not been found. Like you find a native tribe somewhere in the world that nobody found in the Amazon forests. They find them. They didn't even know it existed. They reckon this is like something that's like slowly progressed in time. Not the original ancestor because that wouldn't be possible. But diluted form of it, and that's what we see. It's bigger, because it'd probably be a bit more hairy, a bit bigger. I've got my own theory. That's why when you see in folklore, you hear about giants and small people. You've got to remember that the average size of a person back in 17th, 18th century would have been about 5'1", 5'2", roughly. So anything over 5'1", 5'2", I would think would be considered a giant. Anything under would be considered whatever terminology you'd like to use. Because I don't want to use the terminology and then someone come, he said this, how dare you he said this.
Yeah. So I've never had an encounter with a cryptid, but I'm definitely curious about them, and I've been wanting to talk about them on this podcast for a while. So thanks, Mark, for sharing your stories about the Cornwall cryptids. And how can people find you if they want to know more about you and your books?
Well, I'm on Amazon as Mark Anthony Rains, not with Anthony without the H, because that's posh version. I do my own podcast called Ghostman Radio Station, which is also available on my YouTube station. I do various things like interviews, I do reading of books and comedy and singing and lots of weird and wonderful exotic things. I like to do a little bit of horror now and again because I like the horror, gender horror. I like the fact that you can put human horror and then scare the pants off the people at the same time. Because that's the best horror I think you can have. 1 minute you have a funny moment, think, oh, everything's okay. And then suddenly it's bang.
Well, awesome. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And if you enjoyed today's show, give us some love with a comment, like, or share. Thank you. See you next time.